In the deepest parts of the ocean, you will often steam past small boats that are empty or seemingly empty. Sometimes, they look like they got loose and no one looked for them. Sometimes, they look disgusting, like someone lived in them until they couldn't. Sometimes, it's obvious someone is still in them, but they haven't moved for weeks. Our first story comes from Redditor Rainbow Grim. As a Marine, I used to have the graveyard patrol shift in Beirut Bombing Memorial. Part of the memorial is dedicated to a veteran cemetery. Oddly enough, I never got freaked out being completely alone in a remote cemetery in the middle of the night, surrounded by dense woods on all sides. It was actually kind of peaceful, to be honest. However, one night I was patrolling near the perimeter fence where some of the oldest headstones are, when I heard the sound of a woman humming. I followed the sound and noticed a light glowing through the vines and the brush of a large tree. As I approached, I could literally feel my hair begin to lift as if there was an electric current in the air. It was an old, weathered headstone with a large cross etched into the marble. Only the cross was glowing a bright, vivid blue like a neon bulb. The humming was also suddenly much louder and had a weird plurality to it, like it was coming from hundreds of voices at once. Needless to say, I freaked the fuck out. I screamed like a little girl and sprinted back to the parking lot. I radioed the guard that was supposed to relieve me and forced him to come early, then spent the rest of my shift in the cab of his truck. I don't think he believed me, but he stayed in his truck and didn't go out on patrol until the sun was fully up. A few days later, I worked up the nerve to return to the grave, during the day of course. As I suspected, in the light of day it was a complete mundane headstone. There was no name, only the aforementioned cross. I ran my hands over the headstone and checked to see if maybe there was some sort of hidden light source or solar panel, but no, it was just plain, solid, unremarkable stone. The humming was gone too. I eventually returned to my normal shift, but never again experienced anything out of the ordinary. I never learned who gravestone it was either, but I find myself thinking about it from time to time. It certainly sounds absurd when I say it out loud, and I suppose it could have been hallucination or a trick of my tired brain, but I don't believe it was. I think it was real, a ghost or spirit of some sort, but I don't think it was malevolent at all. Our second story comes from Redditor Immaculate Jones. I was in the US Navy and worked in communications. I was a supervisor on my watch and enjoyed working the night tours while on deployment. We stood 12-hour watches from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Around 2 a.m. I heard a chatter over the 3MC, which is like our internal speaker system used between a few different stations on the ship. It's the bridge asking combat if they've seen anything on surface or air radar, maybe 10 miles out west. Combat returns with a negative, and I don't think anything of it. About 15 minutes go by and the bridge asks again. Then they ask us if we have any message traffic about any ships in the area, aircraft, or anomalous water patterns. I ask one of the guys on watch to perform the request, and now my interest is spiked. I walk out to the comm center and head up to the bridge. I was in the frigate, so the walk was quick, and I get up there and ask what's going on. One of my buddies points me over to the port side and we walk over there. There's about 5 or 6 circular shaped lights about 10 to 15 miles out in the clouds, pretty large. They aren't moving or flying around, but just looking stable. These lights are also casting lights downward on the ocean, and you can see the light refracting back at the water. From what we could see, it didn't appear to be light shining up from the water because it wouldn't pass through the clouds. The clouds also weren't super thick. It was light overcast and it was the middle of the night with no other light pollution on the water. There was nothing in message traffic about any ships, subs, or aircrafts in the area. We were hundreds of miles from land, and the last report of any unusual weather pattern was a waterspout a few hundred miles away. We tried to take pictures with our onboard digital camera using a long exposure, but we couldn't capture the phenomenon. After about 90 minutes, the lights slowly fade away and then completely disappear. I'm sure there's some sort of weather or atmospheric condition for what we saw, but for all intents and purposes, it fit the description of a UFO, unidentified flying object. Our third story comes from Redditor King Dur. I have a buddy who told me a story he probably made up, but it makes a great story nonetheless. I recall the story to the best of my ability, but I would not be able to do this story justice since I haven't heard the story in a few years. This is all classified according to him. He was stationed at a base in the Middle East somewhere. The base was surrounded by a wall that had guard posts at various locations around the wall and one or two other locations that soldiers would keep post, including barracks. There was also a big abandoned warehouse on the base that was not being used. It had huge heavy doors that opened outward from the middle, which were always closed. Soldiers had to walk past this warehouse when switching posts. Well, one night, when my buddy was in his barracks, gunshots went off. Everyone rushed to get geared up to figure out what was going on. Once they figured out the gunshots came from inside the base, they went to the location of the shots. Two soldiers were posted up, guns pointed to the old warehouse, and were freaked the fuck out. One of the doors to the warehouse was pushed slightly open. They yelled at the two soldiers to see what the fuck was going on, but the guys didn't budge. They say that something big and black just ran into the warehouse. Once they calmed the two guys down, they did a sweep of the warehouse and found nothing. It took two soldiers to push the door shut again. The next night, there was screaming coming from inside the warehouse. They did a sweep, nothing. Next night, more scream. Third night, another group of soldiers shifting locations opened fire. They basically had the same story as the first group. They said it was fast as fuck, basically moved faster than they could aim and shoot. Again, the door was pushed open. Took two guys to close it. After this went on for a while, the soldiers were found mentally healthy. A bigger investigation was set up. They pointed two special cameras at the entrance to the warehouse, set up some guys outside, and waited for something to happen. One night the door was pushed open on camera and there was basically a demon that stepped out and started screaming bloody murder. The guards opened fire and the thing sprinted faster than humanly possible back into the warehouse. Both doors were flung open and the thing just screamed. More soldiers came and did a sweep. Nothing. Around this time, the soldiers at the base started to piece a few things together. They had always known that a village nearby the base had a curfew, and no one stays out of their house past nightfall, so some of them went to investigate why. Long story short, the villagers told them that there was a god of death in the area and they dare not stay out past nightfall. Around the time they learned this, a special team came with more equipment. Some bigger guns were sent in, including my buddy with the special recording equipment. They dragged the big double doors open and set up inside the warehouse. It was pitch black, but they could see with their equipment. They set up so two guys were facing each other, making a square of 4 guys total. About 4 hours went by without anything happening. Then, the guy across from my buddy starts making a hand signal. He was signaling that something was behind my friend. The guy to the right of my buddy was dozing off and the other soldier across from my buddy was perfectly still. My friend did a 180 from his chair to a crouched position, giving room for him and the guy across him to open fire. He said when he turned around, he saw this humanoid demon around 9 feet tall, piercing eyes, and as menacing as possible. When he opened fire, the thing was so fast it basically teleported to one side up the wall until it was on the ceiling. They continued to open fire, but the thing was fast and kept appearing behind each of the soldiers, endangering them. Eventually, the soldiers got the equipment and abandoned the building. Their cameras apparently captured everything. My friend was debriefed and told never to speak of it again, and the building was demolished. The villagers related the demon to an old mass grave near the base, which after the events above was dug up and everyone was given proper burial. I without a doubt did not recall everything correctly. His version had way more detail. The way my buddy tells his story is so convincing in detail that it's hard not to believe him, but the story is so incredible that it's very hard to believe at the same time. I hope you guys enjoy the story, and I'd like to thank all 4 Redditors for allowing me to post their stories. Let me know in the comment below how you would react to them if this was happening to you. Also, if you have a personal paranormal story that you would like to share with me, check out my website and send me an email with your experience. Let me know if you'd like me to share yours. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and stay strange.